Admiral Tejo stared at the holographic display showing the latest battle reports. Red dots marked coalition losses across 17 star systems. The war with the Vorthak Empire had been going on for 247 years. His own grandfather had fought in the early battles, and now Tejo was watching his people die in the same endless conflict. Another supply convoy destroyed near the Kepler sector, Commander Da-Un reported as she walked into the command center. Her blue uniform showed the strain of too many sleepless nights. That makes 8 this month. Tejo rubbed his tired eyes. The Xylonian admiral had been fighting this war for 30 years. He had seen too many good soldiers die for small pieces of empty space. How many ships did we lose? 12 frigates and a heavy cruiser. The Vorthak used their new plasma cannons again. Da-Un pulled up the tactical data on her tablet. Our shields held for maybe 10 minutes before failing. The war room fell silent. Captain Min-Su, an Altarian pilot with gray skin and forearms, shook his head slowly. My squadron lost another pilot yesterday. That boy was barely 20 cycles old. Tejo had heard the same story 1,000 times. Young soldiers dying for a war that seemed to have no end. The coalition forces were strong, but so were the Vorthak. Every time one side gained an advantage, the other side found a way to match it. New weapons led to better shields. Better shields led to stronger weapons. The cycle never stopped. "Admiral, we have an incoming transmission," the communications officer called out. "It's from an unknown system. They say they want to join the coalition." Tejo frowned. New members were rare these days. Most civilizations stayed neutral rather than pick a side in the endless war. Put it through. The holographic display changed to show a strange creature. It had only 2 arms and 2 legs, with pale skin and dark hair. The being wore a simple uniform without any advanced technology visible. "Greetings," the creature said in clear galactic standard. "My name is Jinwoo, ambassador from the planet Earth. We represent the human race, and we wish to join the coalition in your fight against the Vorthak Empire." Commander Da-Un looked surprised. "I've never heard of humans or Earth. Where is your system located?" "We call it Sol. It's on the outer edge of what you probably consider civilized space." Jinwoo smiled, showing white teeth. "We know we're not as advanced as other coalition members, but we want to help end this war." Captain Min-Su laughed, but not in a mean way. "Little human, this war has been going on since before your species probably invented space travel. What could you possibly offer?" "We offer ourselves," Jinwoo said simply. "Human soldiers, human ships, and human ideas. We may not have the best technology, but we have something else." "What's that?" Tejo asked, curious despite himself. "We have hope that this war can be won." The command center went quiet. Hope was something most coalition officers had lost long ago. They fought because they had to, not because they believed victory was possible. Da-Un pulled up information on her tablet. "According to our scans of their system, humans use chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. Their most powerful ships are barely faster than light speed. Admiral, with respect, they would be destroyed in minutes against Vorthak forces." Tejo studied the human ambassador. Jinwoo looked calm and confident, not like someone asking for help. He looked like someone offering it. "What kind of military experience does your species have?" "We have been fighting wars for thousands of years," Jinwoo replied. "We've learned how to win against enemies with better weapons and bigger armies. We've learned how to survive when everything seems hopeless." "The Vorthak have energy shields that can stop any kinetic weapon," Min-Su pointed out. "They have plasma cannons that can melt through our strongest armor. How would your primitive weapons help against that?" Jinwoo's smile got wider. "Captain, sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways. Sometimes simple solutions work when complex ones fail." Tejo felt something he hadn't felt in years. It might have been curiosity, or it might have been the beginning of hope. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let us prove ourselves," Jinwoo said. "Give us a small mission, something not too dangerous. If we fail, you lose nothing. If we succeed, maybe we can teach each other new things." Da-Un leaned close to Tejo. "Admiral, Their technology scans show they're at least 200 years behind Coalition standard. Their weapons are basically metal projectiles fired by explosives. But look at their psychological profiles, Tejo whispered back, pointing to his screen. High adaptability scores, extreme persistence ratings, and look at this. They have something called creative problem solving that rates higher than any species in our database. The Admiral looked back at Jin Wu. The human was waiting patiently, not trying to argue or convince them. He seemed sure that his people could help, even though everyone in the room thought they were too primitive to matter. Very well, Tejo said finally. We'll give you a chance. There's a supply depot in the Kepler-7 system that needs guards. It's far from the main battle zones, so it should be safe enough for your people to handle. Thank you, Admiral, Jin Wu said. We won't let you down. After the transmission ended, Captain Minsu shook his head. Admiral, you're sending children to do a soldier's job. Those humans will be dead within a week if the Vorthak find them. Maybe, Tejo replied, still staring at the empty holographic display. But something about them feels different. Did you notice they didn't ask for our weapons or our ships? They just want a chance to fight. Commander Da-un was reading through more data on her tablet. Their planet has multiple governments that have been fighting each other for centuries. They've survived ice ages, plagues, and disasters that would have destroyed most civilizations. But they're still here, and they're still fighting. Still doesn't mean they can fight the Vorthak. Minsu muttered. Tejo nodded, but he kept thinking about what Jinwu had said. Hope that the war could be won. The Admiral couldn't remember the last time anyone had talked about winning instead of just surviving. Outside the command center, the endless war continued. Ships died in the darkness between stars. Soldiers fought and died for small victories that meant nothing in the larger conflict. The Vorthak Empire remained as strong as ever, and the Coalition could do nothing but hold the line. But somewhere in the outer systems, a small fleet of human ships was moving toward their first assignment. They carried primitive weapons and simple technology. But they also carried something the galaxy had forgotten about. The belief that any war could be won if you fought it the right way. The Coalition diplomatic vessel was massive compared to the small human transport that docked with it. Ambassador Jin Wu stepped through the airlock, followed by General Su Jin and Dr. Hyun Woo. The three humans looked tiny in the huge corridors, designed for much larger alien species. Admiral Tejo waited for them in the main meeting room, along with Commander Da-un and Captain Minsu. The room had a large table that could seat 30 beings, but it felt almost empty with just the 6 of them. Welcome aboard, Tejo said, gesturing for the humans to sit. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult. General Su Jin, a woman with short black hair and alert eyes, looked around the room. Your ship is impressive, Admiral. Much more advanced than anything we have. That's what we wanted to discuss, Commander Da-un said, activating a holographic display. We've analyzed your military capabilities and, frankly, we're concerned about your safety. The display showed human weapons and ships compared to Coalition technology. The differences were huge. Human missiles moved at a fraction of the speed of Coalition energy weapons. Human armor was made of metal alloys that Coalition forces had stopped using centuries ago. Dr. Hyun Woo, a quiet man with glasses, studied the display carefully. May I ask how you gathered this information? Long-range scans of your system, Captain Minsu replied. We can see everything from here. Your ship designs, weapon signatures, power outputs. No offense, but your technology is very basic. None taken, Jinwu said calmly. We know we're behind in technology, but we didn't come here to show off our weapons. We came here to help end a war. Admiral Tejo pulled up tactical maps of the current battle zones. The war isn't just about having good weapons, it's about strategy, logistics, and endurance. The Vorthak have been fighting as long as we have. They know all our tactics. Tell us about the Vorthak, General Su Jin said. What makes them so difficult to defeat? Commander Da-un changed the display to show Vorthak military units. The aliens were tall and covered in natural armor plating. Their ships were dark and angular, designed purely for war. They're stronger than most species, naturally aggressive, and completely dedicated to conquest. Their technology is equal to ours in most areas. They use energy shields that can stop any physical projectile, Minsu added. Their plasma weapons can cut through our best armor, and they never retreat, never surrender. Every battle with them is a fight to the death. Dr. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. What about their weaknesses? The coalition officers looked at each other. Weaknesses? Taeho said. If they had obvious weaknesses, we would have won this war decades ago. Everyone has weaknesses, General, Soo-jin said quietly. Sometimes you just need to look at the problem from a different angle. That's exactly why we're assigning you to a safe position, Daun explained. The supply depot at Kepler-7 is far from any major battle zones. You can observe how we fight without being in real danger. Jin-woo looked disappointed. We were hoping for a more active role. Humans learn best by doing, not watching. You'll get your chance to learn, Taeho assured him. But first, we need to see how your people handle coalition equipment and procedures. This isn't a training exercise. Real lives depend on getting this right. The humans were taken on a tour of the ship. They saw coalition weapons that could destroy entire buildings with a single shot. They watched tactical displays that could track thousands of targets across multiple star systems. Everything was far beyond human technology. But Dr. Hyunwoo asked strange questions. He wanted to know why the weapons were designed certain ways. He asked about backup systems and what happened when the main computers failed. He seemed more interested in problems than in the impressive technology. General Soo-jin studied the tactical maps carefully. She asked about Vorthak attack patterns and how long different battles had lasted. When shown videos of coalition victories, she focused on the moments when things went wrong, not on the successful weapon shots. In the ship's armory, the humans demonstrated their own weapons for the coalition officers. General Soo-jin showed them a simple rifle that fired metal bullets using chemical explosives. The bullets moved much slower than energy weapons, but they were completely silent and left no energy signature. Interesting, Captain Minsu said, examining the weapon. But it would never penetrate Vorthak's shields. Maybe not, Soo-jin replied. But shields need power, and power systems can be damaged. Dr. Hyunwoo showed them human explosives, simple devices that created destruction through chemical reactions rather than energy fields. These are very basic, he admitted, but they're also very reliable. No computer chips to jam, no power cells to drain? Commander Daun looked amused. You want to fight a space war with gunpowder and metal bullets? We want to fight a war with whatever works, Jin-woo said. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. The meeting ended with the humans being assigned to Kepler-7. They would guard a supply depot that stored food and medical supplies for coalition forces. It was important work, but safe work. Everyone expected them to spend a few quiet months learning how galactic warfare actually worked. As the human transport prepared to leave, Admiral Taeho found himself watching their ship on the main display. It was small and crude compared to coalition vessels, but it moved with purpose. The humans inside didn't seem worried about their primitive technology or their safe assignment. They're different, Commander Daun said, joining him at the window. How so? Taeho asked. Most new coalition members ask for our best weapons and our strongest ships. They want us to make them stronger, but the humans just want a chance to fight. Captain Minsu walked over to them. I've been thinking about what they said, about looking at problems from different angles. When was the last time we tried something completely new against the Vorthak? Taeho considered the question. Not in years. We use the same tactics because they work well enough to keep us alive. Why risk something new when the old ways keep us from losing? But the old ways aren't winning either, Daun pointed out. On the display, the human ship was moving away toward the outer systems. In a few days, they would reach Kepler-7 and begin their quiet assignment guarding supplies. It would be boring work, but it would keep them safe while they learned. None of the coalition officers expected anything interesting to happen. Kepler-7 was in a quiet sector, far from the main battle zones. The Vorthak had never shown interest in supply depots when there were military targets to attack. But wars have a way of finding the unexpected places. And the humans were about to discover that their safe assignment wasn't as safe as everyone thought. In the deep space between stars, Vorthak scouts were already moving toward the outer systems. They had detected the new ships and wanted to know what the Coalition was doing in previously empty space. Soon, the Vorthak Empire would get its first look at the species everyone had dismissed as too primitive to matter. The real test was about to begin. The Kepler-7 supply depot floated in empty space like a small city made of metal. Storage pods held food, medicine, and repair parts for Coalition forces fighting in nearby systems. Colonel Boram stood on the command deck of the Human Defense Station, watching her people prepare for what everyone hoped would be a quiet assignment. Patrol ships report all clear in sectors 7 through 12, Major Dong-hyun announced. He was studying multiple displays showing the space around the depot. No sign of Vorthak activity. Boram nodded. The humans had been guarding the depot for 3 weeks without seeing a single enemy ship. Most of her soldiers were getting bored. They had signed up to fight in a galactic war, not to babysit supply containers. Lieutenant Ji-hai walked over from the communication station. Colonel, we're getting reports from Coalition Command. There's been increased Vorthak activity in this sector. They want us to stay alert. How increased? Boram asked. Scout ships mostly, but more than usual. Command thinks they might be looking for something. Boram studied the tactical display. The depot was surrounded by her small fleet, 12 human ships that looked tiny compared to Coalition vessels. Each ship carried weapons that Coalition officers considered primitive, but the humans knew how to use them. Major, what's our current defensive status? She asked Dong-hyun. All ships are armed and ready, perimeter mines are active. Emergency protocols are loaded and ready to execute. Dong-hyun paused. Colonel, if the Vorthak come in force, we won't be able to stop them with conventional tactics. Boram smiled grimly. Who said anything about conventional? For the past 3 weeks, the humans had been busy. While Coalition Command thought they were just learning depot operations, they had actually been preparing for war. Human engineers had modified the storage pods, placing explosive charges in carefully calculated positions. Maintenance tunnels now held hidden weapons and supply caches. Dr. Hyun-woo's technical team had studied every piece of Coalition equipment at the depot. They learned how the shields worked, how the computers operated, and most importantly, how everything could be turned into a weapon when necessary. The humans had also been watching Vorthak tactical recordings provided by Coalition Command. They noticed things that years of galactic warfare had made other species stop seeing. The Vorthak always attacked the same way. They came in fast, hit hard, and expected their enemies to meet them in direct combat. Contact! The sensor operator called out suddenly. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Vorthak signatures confirmed. The main display lit up with red dots. 15 Vorthak warships appeared around the depot, forming an attack formation that would have terrified any normal Coalition force. They're not scouts, Major Dong-hyun said quietly. That's a full battle group. Boram activated the emergency communication system. All human ships, this is Colonel Boram. Execute procedure rabbit hole. Repeat, execute procedure rabbit hole. Lieutenant. Ji-hai looked confused. Colonel, shouldn't we call for Coalition reinforcements? The nearest Coalition ships are 6 hours away, Boram replied. We'll be dead or victorious long before they arrive. The Vorthak ships moved toward the depot in perfect formation. Their energy shields glowed with power, and their plasma cannons were already charging for the attack. To them, this looked like an easy victory against a poorly defended supply base. The lead Vorthak commander opened a communication channel. Coalition defenders, you are facing the third battle group of the Vorthak Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Boram responded immediately. Vorthak Commander, this is Colonel Boram of the Human Forces. You are attacking a protected Coalition facility. Leave now or face the consequences. There was silence. For a moment, then harsh laughter came over the communication system. Humans? I have never heard of such a species. No matter. You will die like all coalition dogs. The Vorthak ships opened fire. Plasma beams and energy torpedoes streaked toward the depot and the small human fleet. The attack was overwhelming, designed to destroy everything in the first strike. But the human ships weren't where the Vorthak expected them to be. Procedure Rabbit Hole was a human tactic based on an old Earth strategy. When facing a larger enemy, don't fight them where they expect to fight you. Instead, disappear and hit them where they're not looking. The human ships had used their small size and stealth coatings to hide among the depot's storage pods. When the Vorthak attacked, they were firing at empty space and automated decoy transmitters. All ships execute Phase 2, Boram ordered. The real human fleet emerged from hiding positions throughout the depot complex, but they didn't attack the Vorthak ships directly. Instead, they launched waves of primitive kinetic missiles, simple, metal projectiles with chemical explosive warheads. The Vorthak shields easily stopped the missiles just as coalition officers had predicted, but the explosions created clouds of metal fragments and electromagnetic interference that confused Vorthak sensors. Phase 3. Execute now, Boram commanded. While the Vorthak ships were dealing with the missile swarms, Lieutenant Ji-Hai led a boarding team and small human assault craft. The craft were so primitive that Vorthak scanners barely detected them as threats. But Ji-Hai and her team weren't trying to fight the Vorthak in space. They were trying to get inside their ships. Human boarding tactics were based on an old military principle. If you can't break the enemy's defenses, get inside them. The small assault craft attached themselves to Vorthak ship hulls using magnetic clamps and cutting charges. Boarding Team Alpha is inside Vorthak heavy cruiser, Ji-Hai reported. Beginning internal operations. Inside the Vorthak ship, the humans used tactics no galactic species had ever tried. Instead of trying to fight the larger, stronger aliens directly, they attacked the ship's systems. Chemical explosives placed in key locations disabled shields, weapons, and life support. The Vorthak crew found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand and fight. The humans moved through maintenance tunnels and ventilation systems, striking at critical systems and disappearing before the aliens could respond. What is happening? The Vorthak commander demanded over the communication system. My ships are losing power. Boram smiled as she watched 3 Vorthak vessels go dark on the tactical display. That's what happens when you underestimate humans. The battle turned into chaos as more human boarding teams reached Vorthak ships. The aliens had never faced an enemy that fought from inside their own vessels. Their weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat, not for fighting small teams of saboteurs in narrow corridors. Dr. Hyunwoo's technical modifications proved decisive. The humans had learned exactly which systems to target to disable Vorthak ships without destroying them completely. Within 2 hours, 7 Vorthak warships had been captured intact. The remaining Vorthak ships tried to retreat, but the humans had been busy outside as well. Major Dong-hyun's team had placed mines throughout the surrounding space, using the metal fragments from their earlier missile attacks as camouflage. When the Vorthak tried to escape, they ran into a minefield they couldn't see until it was too late. 3 more ships were disabled by explosions that damaged their engines without destroying their crews. Vorthak Commander, Boram said over the communication system. This is your final chance to surrender. Impossible, came the reply. Humans are primitives. You cannot have defeated us. Check your tactical display, Boram suggested. 13 of your 15 ships are either captured or disabled. You have 2 ships left against our entire fleet. There was a long silence. Then, for the first time in recorded galactic history, a Vorthak commander asked for terms of surrender. When coalition reinforcements finally arrived 6 hours later, they found something that seemed impossible. A small human fleet had not only survived a Vorthak attack, but had captured most of the enemy force using tactics that violated every principle of modern space warfare. Admiral Tae-ho himself came to inspect the battle site. He walked through the captured Vorthak ships, seeing the small holes where human charges had disabled key systems. He watched recordings of Lieutenant Ji-Hai's boarding actions, trying to understand how such a small force had accomplished so much. How? Was all he could say when he met with Colonel Boram. We fought our war, not their war. Boram replied simply. Everyone expects space battles to be ship against ship, weapon against weapon. But wars aren't won by weapons. They're won by people who think differently. The news spread quickly through Coalition space. The small human force at Kepler-7 had done something that veteran Coalition officers had thought impossible. They had defeated a superior Vorthak force and captured most of their ships intact. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know more about human tactics. The news of the human victory at Kepler-7 spread through Coalition space like wildfire. Within days, every military commander was demanding copies of the battle recordings. Within weeks, human tactical advisors were being assigned to Coalition fleets across the war zone. Admiral Tejo stood in his command center, watching reports flow in from multiple sectors. For the first time in decades, the daily briefings contained more victories than losses. Human officers were serving on ships throughout the Coalition fleet, and their strange tactics were working. The siege of Altair 7 has been broken, Commander Da-Yun reported, her voice filled with excitement. Captain Sung-Ho's forces used tunnel tactics to get behind Vorthak lines. The siege that lasted 3 years was ended in 2 weeks. Captain Min-Soo pulled up tactical displays showing the Altair 7 operation. Look at this. Instead of attacking the Vorthak fortifications directly, the humans dug tunnels through the planet's crust. They came up inside the Vorthak base and disabled their shields from within. Tejo studied the recordings. The human approach looked insane by normal military standards. Digging through solid rock while under enemy fire should have been impossible. But somehow Captain Seung-Ho had made it work. What about the Nebula Gambit? Tejo asked. Complete success, Da-Un replied, switching to a different display. Captain Wu Jin used the electromagnetic interference from the Helix Nebula to hide his fleet. The Vorthak reinforcements walked right into an ambush. We captured 4 heavy cruisers without losing a single ship. The Nebula Gambit was another example of human thinking that confused everyone else. Coalition doctrine said to avoid nebulas because they interfered with sensors and communications. But Captain Wu Jin had turned that weakness into a strength, using the interference to hide his ships while developing new ways to communicate and coordinate attacks. And Operation Trojan Star? Min-Soo asked. Commander Da-Un smiled. Dr. Mi Young's Cyber Warfare Division has been incredibly effective. They've learned to hack Vorthak computer systems using techniques no one else had thought of. Last week, they disabled an entire Vorthak battle group by making their own weapons target their own ships. Tejo shook his head in amazement. Doctor, Mi Young's team had discovered something that Coalition computer experts had missed for decades. Vorthak artificial intelligence systems were incredibly advanced, but they had been designed assuming that only other advanced civilizations would try to hack them. They had no defenses against the crude but creative methods humans used. Sir, we have an incoming message from General Su Jin, the communications officer announced. The holographic display showed the human general, now wearing the insignia of Coalition Joint Chief of Staff. Her promotion had been controversial at first, but her results spoke for themselves. Admiral Tejo, Su Jin said, I have news about our next operation. We think we've found a way to strike at the Vorthak homeworld. The command center fell silent. The Vorthak homeworld had never been successfully attacked in over 2 centuries of war. It was protected by massive fleet formations and planetary defense systems that had destroyed every coalition force that tried to approach it. That's impossible, Captain Min-Soo said. We've run thousands of simulations. No fleet large enough to break through their defenses could approach without being detected. General Su Jin smiled. Captain, you're thinking like everyone else has been thinking. What if we don't use a large fleet? A small fleet would be destroyed even faster, Commander Da-Yun pointed out. Not if they don't see it coming, Su Jin replied. We've been studying Vorthak psychology and tactics for months now. They have patterns, just like everyone else, and patterns can be exploited. Over the next hour, General Su Jin explained the plan that human strategists had developed with help from Coalition intelligence officers. It was called Operation Homecoming, and it was unlike anything that had ever been attempted. The plan had 3 phases. First, human ships would create diversions across multiple sectors, drawing Vorthak fleets away from their homeworld. The diversions would look like major coalition offensives, forcing the Vorthak to respond with large forces. Second, while the Vorthak were distracted, small human infiltration teams would use captured Vorthak ships to approach the homeworld. They would disable the planetary defense systems using the same boarding and sabotage tactics that had worked at Kepler-7. Third, once the defenses were down, a combined coalition human fleet would attack the homeworld directly. But the goal wasn't to destroy the planet. It was to capture the Vorthak leadership and force them to negotiate an end to the war. "You want to capture the Vorthak Emperor?" Taeho said slowly, "the most heavily guarded being in their entire empire." "Why not?" Sujin replied. "Every war ends when one side decides to stop fighting. Maybe it's time to give the Vorthak a reason to want peace." The plan was approved after days of debate among coalition leadership. Some officers thought it was genius. Others thought it was suicide. But everyone agreed that the old tactics weren't winning the war, and maybe it was time to try something completely different. The operation began 6 months later. Human-led forces launched simultaneous attacks on Vorthak positions across 17 star systems. Each attack used different tactics: tunnel warfare on some planets, cyber attacks on others, boarding actions against space stations, and psychological warfare that confused Vorthak commanders. The diversions worked perfectly. Vorthak fleets rushed to defend what looked like critical battles, leaving their homeworld with reduced defenses for the first time in centuries. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ji-hai led an infiltration force of captured Vorthak ships toward the homeworld. Her teams had spent months learning to operate alien technology and studying Vorthak military protocols. When they approached the homeworld, they looked like a returning patrol fleet. "Homeworld Control, this is Battle Group 7 returning from patrol." Ji-hai broadcast using perfect Vorthak military communications. "Acknowledged Battle Group 7. Proceed to docking stations for debriefing." The disguised human ships were allowed through the outer defense perimeters without challenge. Once inside, they began the most daring operation in military history, a boarding action against an entire planet's defense system. Human teams spread out across orbital defense platforms and ground-based shield generators. They used the same tactics that had worked on individual ships but on a massive scale. Small charges disabled key systems. Computer viruses shut down artificial intelligence networks. Maintenance tunnels became highways for human saboteurs. Within 12 hours, the planetary defenses that had protected the Vorthak homeworld for centuries were offline. "All units, this is Admiral Taeho," came the signal that everyone had been waiting for. "Execute final phase. All ships, move in." The combined coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace around the Vorthak homeworld. But instead of beginning a destructive bombardment, they sent a single message to the planet below. "This is Admiral Taeho of the coalition forces. We have disabled your defenses and surrounded your world. We do not wish to destroy your planet or harm your people. We wish to speak with your leadership about ending this war." For hours there was no response. Then slowly, Vorthak civilian ships began leaving the planet. The aliens were evacuating their families while their military leaders decided what to do. Finally, a transmission came from the planetary surface. "Coalition forces, this is Emperor Krak of the Vorthak Empire. You have accomplished something we believed impossible. We are ready to discuss terms." The war that had lasted for nearly 2.5 centuries was about to end, not because one side had been destroyed, but because humans had found a way to make peace more attractive than continued fighting. As Admiral Taeho prepared for the most important diplomatic meeting in galactic history, he thought about the small human transport that had docked with his ship less than 2 years ago. Ambassador Jin Woo had promised that humans could help end the war. At the time, it had seemed like the desperate hope of a primitive species. Now, it looked like the promise that would bring peace to the galaxy. The ancient throne room of the Vorthak Empire had never seen anything like this. For the first time in over 2 centuries, representatives from both sides of the Galactic War sat at the same table, not as enemies meeting in battle, but as civilizations trying to make peace. Emperor Krak was a massive figure even by Vorthak standards. his natural armor plate scarred from decades of personal combat. He sat across from Admiral Tejo and General Su Jin, studying the humans with curious eyes. Ambassador Jin Wu sat at the head of the table, chosen by both sides to lead the negotiations. "You fight in ways we have never seen," Emperor Crack said, his deep voice echoing in the vast chamber. "My commanders studied the recordings from your battles. They say your tactics should not work, yet somehow they do." Jin Wu nodded respectfully. "Your Majesty, we fight differently because we are different. Humans have always had to find new ways to solve old problems. The battle at Kepler 7 should have been a simple victory for our forces," the Emperor continued. 15 of our best ships against a small supply depot. Yet somehow, a handful of humans turned our own strength against us. General Su Jin leaned forward. "Your ships are powerful, Your Majesty, but power alone doesn't win wars. We learned that from our own history. Sometimes the smaller force wins because they're willing to do things the larger force never expects." Emperor Crack's War Council sat along the sides of the table, veteran commanders who had never lost a battle until they encountered human tactics. They looked uncomfortable with the entire situation, but they couldn't argue with the results. "Explain to me," the Emperor said, "how your people broke the siege of Altair 7th. My forces had held that planet for 3 years. The coalition had tried to break the siege dozens of times and failed." Captain Sung Ho, who had led the Altair 7 operation, stood to address the Emperor. "Your Majesty, your forces controlled the sky and the surface, but they couldn't control what was underground. We dug tunnels through solid rock for 2 weeks coming up inside your base. While your soldiers watched for attacks from above, we attacked from below." "Madness," one of the Vorthak commanders muttered, "digging through rock while under bombardment." "It worked," Sung Ho replied simply. Dr. Mi Young was asked to explain her cyber warfare successes. She stood quietly, looking small next to the massive aliens, but her voice was steady. "Your computer systems are very advanced, Your Majesty. Much more sophisticated than ours. But sometimes that sophistication is a weakness. Your artificial intelligence systems were so complex that they couldn't recognize simple attacks. You made our own weapons fire on our own ship," another Vorthak commander said angrily. "Yes," Dr. Mi Young replied. "We used basic programming techniques that your systems weren't designed to detect. It's like using a rock to break a computer. The computer is more advanced than the rock, but the rock still wins." Emperor Crack was silent for a long time, studying the humans around the table. Finally, he spoke. "In 247 years of war, no enemy has ever captured one of our ships intact. You captured 13 ships in your first battle. No enemy has ever successfully attacked our homeworld. You disabled our planetary defenses in one night. How is this possible?" Ambassador Jin Wu answered carefully. "Your Majesty, I think it's because we didn't know it was impossible. When someone tells you something can't be done, you have 2 choices. You can believe them or you can try anyway. Humans usually choose to try. But there must be more than that," the Emperor insisted. "Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. Your technology is centuries behind both ours and the Coalition's. Yet you defeated forces that should have destroyed you easily." General Su Jin smiled. "Your Majesty, let me ask you a question. In all your military training, were you ever taught to expect an enemy to dig tunnels through solid rock while under fire?" "No," the Emperor replied. "Were you taught to defend against enemies who hide inside your own supply depots and turn them into weapons? No. Were you trained to fight enemies who board your ships not to capture them, but to sabotage them from within? No," the Emperor said again, beginning to understand. "That's why we won," Su Jin explained. "We didn't fight the war you were trained to fight. We fought our own war, using our own methods. And because no one expected those methods, no one knew how to defend against them." Dr. Hyunwoo, who had been quiet throughout most of the negotiations, finally spoke. "Your Majesty, there's something else. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've learned to fight enemies who are stronger, faster, and better equipped than we are. We've learned to win when we should lose." "And now?" Emperor Crack asked. Now we'd like to stop fighting and start building, Jinwoo replied. Your empire is strong and proud. The coalition is advanced and organized. Humanity is creative and adaptable. Instead of destroying each other, imagine what we could accomplish working together. The negotiations continued for 3 days. The terms that emerged were unlike any treaty in galactic history. Instead of one side surrendering to the other, both the coalition and the Vorthak Empire agreed to end hostilities and work toward mutual cooperation. The Vorthak would keep their territories but stop expanding. The coalition would maintain their defenses but not seek to conquer Vorthak worlds. And humanity would serve as mediators, helping both sides find peaceful solutions to future disputes. There is one thing I must know, Emperor Crack said as the treaty was being prepared for signing. What gave you the confidence to believe you could end a war that had lasted for centuries? Ambassador Jinwoo thought for a moment. Your Majesty, humans have a saying, the impossible just takes a little longer. We've never met a problem that couldn't be solved if you were willing to think about it differently. The signing ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Beings who had known nothing but war for their entire lives watched as ancient enemies put down their weapons and shook hands. It seemed like a miracle, but it was really just the result of human stubbornness and creativity. Admiral Taeho stood with the other coalition officers watching the historic moment. He remembered the day a small human transport had docked with his ship, carrying 3 representatives of a species no one had ever heard of. At the time, he had thought they were too primitive to matter. Now he understood that they hadn't been primitive at all. They had just been different. And sometimes, being different was exactly what the galaxy needed. Captain Minsu approached him during the celebration. Admiral, I've been thinking about what the humans accomplished. They didn't win because they had better weapons or better ships. No, Taeho agreed. They won because they refused to accept that the war couldn't be won. Do you think they knew they could do it? Minsu asked. When they first arrived, do you think they really believed they could end a war that had lasted for centuries? Taeho looked across the room at the human delegation. General Sujin was discussing future cooperation agreements with former Vorthak enemies. Dr. Mi-young was already working on joint technology projects. Lieutenant Ji-hai was teaching Vorthak officers about her boarding tactics, but it was Ambassador Jinwoo who caught his attention. The human diplomat was talking quietly with Emperor Crack, and both leaders were smiling. 2 years ago, they had been enemies. Now they were planning a peaceful future. I don't think they knew they could do it, Taeho said finally. I think they just decided to try anyway. And for humans, that seems to be enough. The war was over. The galaxy was at peace, and somewhere in the outer systems, human colonies were already planning their next impossible project, turning former battlegrounds into gardens and ancient enemies into friends. The impossible, as humans like to say, had just taken a little longer than expected. But it had happened, and the galaxy would never be the same. As the celebration continued around him, Admiral Taeho made a mental note to never again underestimate a species just because their technology was primitive. He had learned that the most powerful weapon in the universe wasn't energy shields or plasma cannons. It was hope combined with the willingness to try something new. And humans, it seemed, had more of both than any species in the galaxy.